She slapped me. In front of 200 guests, the priest, and her new husband. My daughter raised her hand and struck me across the face. The music stopped. Gasps echoed through the hall like ripples in still water. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stood there, hand to my cheek, staring at the child I once rocked to sleep. You should have stayed out of this, she hissed before turning away. I built her life with my bare hands, and in one moment she reduced me to nothing. But what she didn't know was, I wasn't finished yet. I used to call her my miracle. After 4 miscarriages and a doctor gently telling me not to try anymore, I found myself pregnant again at 37. I was terrified, cautious, and dared not dream. But she held on. Through the nausea, the endless bedrest, the bleeding scares, she held on. And when she finally arrived, wrinkled and screaming and pink, I wept like I'd never wept before. I named her Lily. My Lily. Her father, Thomas, was distant even then. He held her once, said, "She's a strong one," and left the room to take a phone call. Work always came first to him. His business dinners, late nights, and endless meetings. I learned early on that if I wanted Lily to grow up feeling loved, I'd have to give her enough affection for 2 parents. And I did. I remember Saturday mornings in our little 2-bedroom apartment. I'd wake up before her, make pancakes shaped like bears and stars, then sit beside her as she colored in a princess book while I sipped coffee. She used to hold my hand when we crossed the street, even when she was 8, just because your hand feels safe, Mommy. She was my world. I was hers. There were hard years, of course. Money was always tight. Thomas eventually left. Not with a bang, but with a suitcase and a note. I need to be free, it read. Just that. Nothing about Lily. Nothing about me. I found the note after putting Lily to bed, right after singing her lullaby. That night I cried into her pillow so she wouldn't hear me. I worked 2 jobs, secretary by day, waitress by night. My back hurt. My feet blistered. But every time I saw her sleeping with her mouth slightly open and her stuffed bunny tucked under her chin, I knew it was worth it. Her school years were the best. She was so bright, sharp with her questions, always curious. I still have a drawing she made when she was 7. It's a lopsided picture of the 2 of us standing under a rainbow. In crayon she wrote, "Me and Mommy against the world." God, I used to look at that and cry. I made every costume for every school play. I baked cookies for fundraisers. I sat in the front row of every dance recital, clutching a bouquet of grocery store roses like it was a trophy. When she got sick, I stayed up all night cooling her forehead with a damp cloth and singing old lullabies, just like my mother had done for me. We didn't have much, but I always made sure she had the best I could give. I bought her first real dress with tip money, laid away over 6 weeks. I remember how her eyes lit up when she twirled in it, the skirt billowing like petals. She called herself Princess Lily for a week after that. And for a while she really was happy. We were happy. Even without her father. Or maybe because of it. But as she grew older, something began to shift. Nothing sharp or sudden, just small things. A new tone in her voice. A roll of her eyes when I asked questions. She started spending weekends at her father's new house. Some large place with a pool and a woman named Candace who wore diamonds even when she grocery shopped. I tried not to resent it. I told myself it was good for her to have both parents, even if one of them had left. When she came back from those weekends, her stories were filled with things I couldn't give her. Horseback riding, spa days, shopping trips. I'd smile and nod and pretend I wasn't dying inside. "I wish we had a pool," she said once, absent-mindedly, staring out our apartment window. I smiled and said, "Me too." Then quietly sold my mother's old bracelet so I could buy her swimming lessons that summer. The first time she called me old-fashioned, I laughed. She was 13, obsessed with her phone and some celebrity makeup guru. I told her I didn't mind being old-fashioned. It meant I knew what mattered. She didn't respond, just shrugged and went back to her screen. Still, I told myself it was just a phase. Teenagers pull away. That's natural. She'll come back to me. I clung to that belief like a raft in deep water. When she graduated high school, I cried so hard I embarrassed her in front of her friends. But she let me hug her, and that night we sat on the couch and watched old videos of her as a toddler. She fell asleep with her head on my lap, and I thought, there she is. My Lily. She wanted to go to college and I made it happen. I took out a second mortgage, dug into my retirement, and made sure she wouldn't have to worry about tuition. "Mom, you didn't have to," she said when I told her. "But I did. Of course I did. It was my job to make her dreams possible, even if it meant pushing mine to the side." For a while I believed we were still close. She called sometimes, sent pictures of her campus, even came home for holidays. But she stopped confiding in me, stopped sharing the details. Her laugh sounded different, sharper, more polished, like she was becoming someone else. And I didn't know how to hold on to her without pulling her away from what she wanted. So I let her go, bit by bit, inch by inch, hoping she'd find her way back. I had no idea that instead of drifting, she was disappearing, and that someday she'd look at me, not as her mother, but as something in her way. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't some dramatic moment where she screamed that she hated me or slammed a door and never came back. That would have been easier in some twisted way. At least I would have known where I stood. But with Lily the change was slower, softer, like water wearing away stone. It started with phone calls that got shorter. I'd ask how her classes were going and she'd say, "Good, busy," then change the subject. When I asked about her new boyfriend, she just said, "It's early. Don't get nosy, Mom." Nosy. I'd never been called that before. She came home less and less. Holidays turned into obligations. I'd clean the apartment top to bottom, buy her favorite snacks, even get the good wine she used to sneak a sip of when she was younger. But she'd arrive distracted, eyes on her phone, thumbs tapping out texts to people I didn't know. She started wearing makeup I'd never seen her use before. Harsh, sharp lines that made her look older. She didn't want to eat my cooking anymore, said it was too heavy. And when I tried to give her leftovers to take back to campus, she smiled with tight lips and said, "No one really eats like that anymore." Like that? What did that mean? Like me? Once during dinner I told a funny story about her as a toddler, how she used to sing "Twinkle Twinkle" at the top of her lungs in the grocery store aisle. She interrupted me halfway through. "Can we not do the whole nostalgia thing, Mom? It's a little cringy." Cringy. My stories were now cringy. I laughed it off. I always laughed it off. I told myself she was just trying to find her independence, that she didn't mean to be cold. She was just busy, overwhelmed, tired. God knows I'd been tired most of my life. I couldn't blame her for that. But then the questions started. Little ones at first. Do you have to pay that much for your insurance? Why don't you sell the apartment and move into something smaller? Have you thought about getting some help? Like a companion or nurse? I'd blink confused. Why? I'm fine. She'd shrug. Just thinking ahead. Thinking ahead to what? To when I'd be someone she needed to manage. She started asking about my bank account. Not in a caring way, no, it was more calculating than that. Do you have a will? She asked once while we were folding laundry. I looked at her, startled. That's a strange question. It's not really, she said without looking up. Everyone should have one. It's just responsible. I nodded, pretending to agree. But something knotted in my stomach. She was 24. Why was she so interested in my finances? One day, I left my phone on the kitchen counter and stepped out to check the mail. When I came back, I saw her quickly put it down, screen facing the table. Too quickly. Too guilty. I didn't say anything, but that night I changed all my passwords. She'd been talking more and more about her father again, too. Calling him Dad now instead of just Thomas, like she used to when she was angry. She'd mentioned how helpful he'd been with her career, how connected he was, how Candace had introduced her to the right kind of people. And then casually, I think they might help us with the wedding. It was the first time I realized I wasn't part of that us. When she got engaged, I found out from a friend on Facebook. A picture of Lily on one knee in Central Park, laughing, a diamond on her hand, her fiancé grinning beside her. I stared at the photo for a full minute before I realized what was wrong. I hadn't even met him yet. I called her immediately. You're engaged. Oh yeah, sorry, I meant to call, she said like she'd forgotten to pick up milk. It just happened fast. You'll meet him soon. I met him 2 months later, at a brunch her father hosted. They didn't invite me directly. I got the time and place from a mutual acquaintance who assumed I was already on the list. I showed up in my best blouse and a gift in hand, only to be seated next to the kitchen while Candace played the role of mother of the bride. Lily barely spoke to me. Her fiancé, Jason, shook my hand and called me ma'am. That night I cried for hours. Not because of the brunch, but because I finally let myself admit something I'd been denying for years. My daughter didn't see me as her mother anymore. She saw me as a relic. A poor, plain woman who worked too much, aged too fast, and didn't fit in with her new glossy world. I didn't have the polish, the money, or the designer bags. I had calloused hands, arthritis in my knees, and an old apartment filled with memories she was trying to erase. But what hurt most wasn't the fading affection. It was the fact that she was starting to believe I owed her something. Like my love, my sacrifices, my entire life had been some kind of debt she could collect on. And that one day she'd come for what was hers. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I could feel it coming. And the worst part was, I still loved her. Even as I felt her pulling away, replacing me, reshaping our story into something more convenient, I loved her. But I was starting to realize that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. And that's when everything began to change. It was the bridal shower that broke me. Not the slap, not yet. That would come later. But this was the first time I felt her truly cut me out. Not just with her words or distance, but with intention. With precision. Like surgery. I found out about the bridal shower from a neighbor. Marlene. Sweet woman. Always gardening in a floppy hat and wide smile. She waved me over one morning as I was getting the mail and said, "Oh, I saw the invite for Lily's shower. Must be exciting, huh?" I blinked. What invite? Her smile faded. "Oh, I just assumed." I smiled politely. No, I must have missed it. Inside I felt something shift. A quiet, sharp crack down the middle of my chest. Not rage, not yet. Just confusion. Hurt. The kind that makes you sit on the edge of your bed with your hands still holding your keys, unable to move. I called Lily. No answer. I waited a few hours, then texted, "Hey love, just checking. Am I still invited to your bridal shower? Haven't seen anything. Read." No reply. 3 days passed. Then a short message. "It's just a small thing. No big deal. Mostly friends from college. No, sorry. No, I wanted to talk to you about it." No warmth. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened Facebook. There it was. Photos. Dozens of them. Lily in a white satin dress, laughing with a glass of champagne in hand, surrounded by smiling women. Candace at her side, beaming like she had given birth to her. Jason standing in the background with a drink, looking proud. Pink balloons, gold lettering that spelled out from Miss to Mrs. A 3-tiered cake with fondant roses. No seat for me. No mention of me. Not even a single "thanks, Mom." That night, I sat at the kitchen table until 2 a.m. just staring at the empty chair across from me. The one she used to sit in, legs swinging, asking for more syrup. The one she used to climb into when she was scared of thunder. The one I used to save for her, even when she was away at college, just in case she came home. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I felt something harden inside me. A shell forming over whatever softness was left. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she didn't want to mix family and friends. Maybe it wasn't intentional. But then came the rehearsal dinner. She sent me an invite this time. Formal, with RSVP instructions and a menu selection. No phone call, no personal touch. Just a piece of paper that looked like it had been printed and handed out in bulk. I showed up early. I always did. I brought a small scrapbook I'd made of her childhood photos, thinking maybe she'd want to include it in the decorations or just look through it with me. It was nothing fancy, just printed photos and notes in the margins. Her first drawing. A letter she wrote to Santa. The me and mommy against the world drawing she did in 2nd grade. When I arrived, she barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, you made it." Candace swooped in to hug me, fake smile and all. "So glad you could come. Lily's been swamped with details. You know how it is." I nodded, handed Lily the scrapbook. "What's this?" she asked. "Just some memories. I thought you might want to share them. Or just look." She flipped through the first page, then shut it quickly. "Yeah, maybe later." She set it down beside a stack of discarded napkins and gift bags like it was nothing. Nothing. The dinner went on. Speeches were made. Candace told a story about how Lily used to pretend to be a bride when she was little. A story I knew was false, because I was the one who had made her veil out of tissue paper and a headband. Jason toasted his parents. Lily thanked everyone who helped bring this day together. I wasn't mentioned. Not once. Even the seat I was given, far off at the end of the table, next to a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, told me everything. I was a guest. An afterthought. A relic from a life she didn't want displayed anymore. And no one said a word. Not even Thomas. He sat there, smug and silent, his arm around Candace like they were royalty. Like they had raised her, shaped her, made her into the polished woman she was becoming. I watched my daughter smile for photos, toss her hair, clink glasses. She didn't look at me again all evening. The next morning I went to retrieve the scrapbook. It wasn't there. I asked a server. A planner. Jason. No one had seen it. I texted her that night. Did you bring the scrapbook home? Read. No reply. I would find out a week later from Marlene again that Candace had asked one of the planners to get rid of the old photo book because it clashed with the aesthetic. Clashed. With the aesthetic. That was the first night I cried. Really cried. The kind where you can't catch your breath. And you start asking questions out loud like someone might answer you. Why? Why would she do this? What did I do wrong? But deep down I already knew. This wasn't about what I'd done. It was about what I represented. Struggle. Sacrifice. The unpolished truth. And she wanted none of that on display in her perfect world. She didn't slap me that night. Not with her hand. But with her silence, her dismissal, her quiet, deliberate erasure. She hit me harder than she ever would with fingers. And I began to realize this wasn't just emotional distance. This was strategy. The first time I heard them talking, I wasn't even trying to listen. It was a Tuesday afternoon and I had stopped by unannounced, something I hadn't done in years, but after everything with the bridal shower and the scrapbook I wanted to try. One last time. I baked banana bread, wrapped it in foil the way she used to love, and took the bus across town to the condo she shared with Jason. They weren't expecting me. I rang the bell and waited. I could hear voices inside, muffled, sharp, too fast. Then silence. Jason opened the door. Just a crack. Oh, hi, Mrs. Carter. Hi, Jason. I was in the neighborhood. Brought something for Lily. He looked over his shoulder, then opened the door a little wider. She's just on a call. But come in. I stepped inside. The condo was too clean, too white. No warmth, no clutter. Not like the home I raised her in. There wasn't a single photo of her childhood on the walls, just abstract art and black and white pictures of places they'd probably never been. Jason disappeared down the hallway. I sat quietly on the edge of a cream-colored couch, clutching the bread in my lap. That's when I heard it. The door to their bedroom wasn't closed all the way, and their voices slipped through the gap like smoke. She won't even notice, Jason was saying. She doesn't understand finances. Lily sighed. I just don't want to fight, okay? She gets so emotional about everything. Like it's still the 90s. Jason's voice again. Babe, you're doing the right thing. Your dad said the apartment's worth way more than she thinks. You deserve that security. And let's be honest, she's not going to be around forever. I froze. Silence. Then her voice, quieter now but unmistakably hers. We just have to move fast. Before she changes her will or something. Will. I sat there, breath shallow, unable to blink. My heart thudded in my ears so loud I could barely hear the rest. Something about consolidating accounts and making it look like her idea. And Dad's lawyer said it can be done discreetly. Discreetly. I stood up. My legs felt weak. Jason came back into the living room and smiled too wide. She just got off the call. Want me to get her? No, I said. Actually, I just remembered I have to be somewhere. I handed him the bread. My hands were shaking. Tell her I stopped by. I walked the 3 blocks to the bus stop on autopilot. I don't even remember getting home. But once I did, I sat in the armchair by the window, the one Thomas used to hate, and I didn't move for hours. They were planning behind my back. Not just a wedding, not just decorations or seating charts. No, they were planning my disappearance. Quietly, legally, financially. Like I was a piece on the board to be moved and managed. And they thought I wouldn't notice. I thought about my late mother, how she'd warned me long ago to always keep something tucked away. Not everyone who smiles at you wants what's best for you, she used to say. Especially when money's involved. I never imagined it would be my daughter. But now I saw it clearly. The shower. The missing scrapbook. The questions about my will. This wasn't just distance. This was a campaign. And I'd been the fool handing them the tools. That night I pulled out every document I owned. Birth certificate, bank statements, deed to the apartment, insurance papers. I spread them across the kitchen table and started making a list. Every asset, every account, every single thing I had left in the world. Then I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a letter Thomas had sent me right after Lily was born. One of the rare times he wrote anything heartfelt. I know I'm not good at this, he wrote. But you are. She's going to grow up strong because of you. Don't let her forget where she comes from. I used to read that letter when I felt small. When Lily was sick and I couldn't afford her medication. When the lights flickered because the bill was overdue. When I sat alone at parent-teacher conferences because he never showed. I used to believe in that version of her. The girl who came from love. From me. But the girl I saw now, she wasn't interested in remembering. She was too busy replacing. The next day I started watching. Closely. I stopped talking and started listening. I met with my friend Denise from church, whose cousin worked in elder law, and asked careful, quiet questions. I began asking Lily to explain things again when she talked about her wedding. And I took notes. Mental ones. Real ones. When Lily asked me for my social security number, just for a bridal registry form, I smiled and said I'd fill it out myself. When Jason joked about downsizing and how trendy senior living communities were, I laughed politely and changed the subject, but I remembered every word. I started speaking less, because they had no idea I had started to see. It hurt. God, it hurt. But pain has a way of sharpening the senses. And I was starting to wake up to just how much I'd been blind to. They thought I was weak. They thought I was old, tired, irrelevant. But they were wrong. Because a mother might bend for her child. She might sacrifice, forgive, and overlook 1,000 slights. But she never forgets. And I was done pretending not to notice. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I invited her over for tea. I set the table just the way she used to like it. Little china cups, the lemon cookies from the bakery down the street, and her favorite cinnamon tea steeping quietly in the pot. I even laid out the napkins I embroidered back in '92, thinking maybe, just maybe, the sight of them might soften her. She arrived late. No apology, just a distracted kiss on my cheek, and a quick glance around the kitchen like she was checking for dust. She sat down, pulled out her phone and said, "I can't stay long. We have a tasting with the caterer in an hour." I poured her tea anyway. I needed to see her face when I asked the question. "So," I said gently, "Jason and your father, they've been helping you with wedding stuff, huh?" She perked up. "Oh yeah, Dad's been amazing. He knows all the right people. Jason too. We've got a planner Candace recommended. She's incredible." I nodded, stirred my tea slowly. "And you've been thinking about your future, I imagine? Financially?" She paused. Just for a second. "Yeah, we're trying to be smart. Budgeting, talking to some advisors. You know how it is." I looked at her then. Really looked at her. This was the same girl who used to cry when I left her at kindergarten. The same girl who used to write, "I love you, Mommy," in purple crayon and tape it to my mirror. The girl who once whispered, "Don't ever die, okay?" while clutching my nightgown during a thunderstorm. And now she sat across from me, talking like a banker in heels. I smiled. "I see. So you've thought about what happens when I'm gone." Her eyes flicked up just briefly. "Mom, it's not like that." "No," I said softly, "because from where I sit, it seems a lot like that." She scoffed. "You're reading into things." I set my cup down. "I overheard you, Lily. You and Jason. The other week." She froze. I waited. "You don't know what you heard," she said finally, voice tight. "It was taken out of context." "There wasn't a lot of context needed," I replied. "It was pretty clear. You're looking at me like I'm a problem to be solved." She stood up suddenly. "This is ridiculous. I came here for tea, not an interrogation." "No, you came here thinking I was still too blind to see what's going on." She laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. You always do this. You make yourself the victim in everything. That hit harder than I expected. She kept going. You raised me to be strong, right? To plan ahead? So why is it a betrayal if I think about the future? About security? You act like I owe you everything just because you gave birth to me. I blinked. You don't owe me everything. You owe me respect. She opened her mouth to respond, then shut it. I continued quietly now. If you had come to me, honestly, openly, we could have had a conversation. But instead, you're sneaking around with lawyers and planners and trying to figure out how to get my apartment before I've even drawn my last breath. She said nothing. I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. But it passed quickly. Do you even hear how dramatic you sound? She said. I stood too. My knees ached, but I stood tall. No. I hear how heartless you sound. A long silence stretched between us. The tea cooled. You're angry, she said at last. I get it. But don't pretend like you haven't made me feel small for years. Always acting like I'm your little project. Like I owe you my entire life. I shook my head slowly. I never wanted your life, Lily. I just wanted a seat at your table. Her lip trembled just slightly. Then it vanished again, replaced by cold calm. We'll talk later, she said. When you've calmed down. And with that she walked out. No hug. No goodbye. Just the soft click of the door and her perfume lingering in the hallway. I stood there for a long time. Then I sat. And then, for the first time in a long while, I let the anger in. Not just the sadness. Not just the disappointment. Anger. I thought about all I'd done. The nights I stayed up sewing buttons. The school trips I couldn't afford but paid for anyway. The birthday parties I threw alone. The doctor visits, the bullies I stood up to for her. The late-night drives when she was too scared to sleep. And for what? So she could treat me like a financial inconvenience? The next day, Denise brought over her cousin, Philip, the lawyer. Quiet man, kind eyes. We sat at the kitchen table with cups of fresh coffee and a yellow notepad. I want to update my will, I said. He looked up. Of course. What changes are you thinking? I took a deep breath. I want my daughter removed from it entirely. He blinked. Are you sure? Yes. And I want a clause added. If anyone contests it, the whole estate goes to a charity, a women's shelter, or a scholarship fund. Somewhere it'll mean something. He nodded slowly. Understood. Denise reached for my hand under the table. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I signed the documents with steady fingers. When it was done, I felt hollow but strong. Like a tree after the storm, branches stripped but roots still deep. Let her think I'm emotional. Let her think I'm old-fashioned. She's about to learn exactly what kind of woman raised her. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Not because it weighed more, but because of what it meant. Each stroke of ink across those legal pages felt like carving a line through years of memories. A permanent boundary between what once was and what now had to be. Philip, the lawyer Denise had introduced me to, sat patiently across from me, flipping through the last few pages of the draft. Take your time, Marjorie. Nothing here is rushed. His tone was soft but professional, reassuring without pity. I appreciated that. I nodded, scanning the papers in front of me for the 5th time. Each clause felt like a quiet farewell to the version of my life I had spent decades building. The apartment was to go to the Oak Haven Women's Shelter in my name. My small savings account would fund a vocational scholarship for single mothers. The jewelry I'd inherited from my mother, just a modest collection, was to be auctioned, with proceeds donated to the literacy program at the local library. And my daughter Lily? Nothing. Not $1. Not a keepsake. Not a name mentioned in bequest. But what mattered most, what gave me peace, was the no contest clause. If anyone contests this will, Philip had explained gently, the entire estate, regardless of claims, is automatically transferred to a neutral charity listed here. No loopholes. No backdoors. No emotional pleas in court. Just silence and consequence. Do you want to include a personal letter? He asked. I paused. Yes. And no. A part of me wanted to explain everything. To pour my heart into a final goodbye just in case. But another part, the part that had been bruised and silenced over and over, felt tired of always doing the explaining, always trying to be understood by people who never listened. No, I said. Not this time. He nodded. No judgment. I signed the last page. And just like that, decades of sacrifice, pain, love, and betrayal were sealed into a single manila folder. Denise drove me home afterward. Neither of us said much on the way, but as we pulled up to my building, she reached over and squeezed my hand. You didn't lose your daughter, Marjorie, she said gently. You found your voice. I smiled, but my heart ached. Back inside, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the late afternoon light settle over the city. It was the same view I'd stared at through birthdays, Christmases, stormy nights, and long summers. 100 versions of Lily flashed through my mind, her baby teeth grinning under frosting, her first scraped knee, her high school graduation, the night she cried over her first heartbreak. I loved her. I would always love her. But love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And I wasn't willing to hand her the matches to burn down the rest of me. A few days later she called. It was a short call. Just details about the rehearsal dinner, confirmation of the venue, and a reminder about the dress code. As if I were a guest. Not her mother. I let her speak, gave polite answers, and kept my voice steady. Then before we hung up I said, just so you know, I made some legal updates this week. There was a pause. To the will? She asked, cautious. Yes. Another pause. Okay. Good. That's responsible. I could almost hear her calculating. Anything I should know? No, I said, and then added, unless you're planning to contest it someday. She laughed, too quickly, too nervously. Of course not. I smiled to myself. Good. We ended the call with nothing more than a brief see you soon. No warmth. No connection. Just silence in between polite syllables. But after I hung up I didn't cry. Instead, I walked to my bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of my cedar chest, and pulled out something I hadn't touched in years, my old sewing kit. It still smelled faintly of lavender. Inside were needles, threads, thimbles, and a swatch of faded pink cloth. The beginnings of a quilt I never finished, one I had planned to give Lily when she moved into her first real home. The center square already had her name embroidered in tiny cursive letters. Lily. Always loved. I ran my fingers over it. She would never see it now. I didn't know what I'd do with the quilt. Maybe donate it. Maybe cut it apart and start something new. But in that moment I knew one thing for certain. The version of me she remembered. The soft, tired mother who'd always say yes, always forgive, always fold herself smaller just to make others feel bigger, was gone. I had grieved that woman. Now I was building someone new. Someone who didn't apologize for having limits. Someone who wasn't afraid to be alone if that meant being at peace. The will was just a piece of paper. But for me it was the first time I chose myself. I wasn't going to attend the wedding. After everything, after the lies, the erasure, the coldness, I had decided to stay home. I had even typed out a simple message. Wishing you a beautiful day. I won't be attending, but I hope it brings you joy. I didn't send it. Not because I changed my mind, but because the universe had one last blow to deliver before I made my move. 3 days before the wedding, I received a letter. Not a call. Not a visit. A letter. Folded neatly in an ivory envelope, hand-delivered by a young man in a crisp suit. Are you Marjorie Carter? He asked. I nodded. He handed me the envelope, gave me a slight bow, and walked away. Inside was a formal notice. From a real estate lawyer I'd never heard of. The contents were simple and surgical. This is to inform you that preliminary steps have been taken by Miss Lillian Carter and Mr. Jason Walters to explore the legal transfer of property located at my address, based on future occupancy and dependency clauses. Kindly prepare all necessary documentation for evaluation. I read it twice, then a third time. They weren't just talking anymore. They were trying to take my home. The home I had lived in for 38 years. The home I had paid off with 2 jobs, endless sacrifice, and more tears than bricks. The place where I held Lily when she had nightmares, where I sat with my dying mother, where I baked cookies every Christmas whether anyone came over or not. They were trying to take everything. And they hadn't even waited until after the wedding. The audacity, the entitlement, the casual cruelty of it all. It boiled inside me like tea left on the burner too long. That night I didn't sleep. I packed instead. Not bags. Not clothes. Documents. I gathered every receipt, every deed, every statement that proved that this home, this life was mine. I made copies. I labeled envelopes. I called Denise and asked if she had that old portable recorder her husband used to use for lectures. Sure, she said. Why? I didn't answer. I just needed it. The next morning I wrote a letter. Not for them. For myself. For clarity. To the woman I raised. You could have asked. You could have come to me. I would have given you anything willingly. But you chose greed over grace. Secrecy over honesty. And for that I grieve you. I sealed it and placed it in my safe, next to the updated will. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Thomas. He answered on the second ring. Well, this is a surprise. Meet me, I said. 1 hour. Cafeteria at St. James Hospital. He was confused but curious enough to agree. When we sat down across from each other, two older versions of the people who once shared a home, he leaned in, smirking. What's this about? I slid the envelope across the table. You helped them try to take my house. His smirk disappeared. He opened the letter, read it and sat back. Silent. I know about the lawyer, I continued. I know about Candace's input. I know Lily's name is nowhere on the lease, the deed, or the mortgage. And I know this is your doing. He cleared his throat. She came to me for help. No, Thomas. She came to you for manipulation. And you gave it to her. He looked like he wanted to argue, but I held up a hand. I'm not here to fight. I just want you to know, when the dust settles and people start asking why your daughter's crying at her wedding, remember this moment. You chose pride over peace. I stood. He didn't stop me. The morning of the wedding arrived. The sky was overcast, and the air felt thick with something like the weather knew what was coming. I dressed simply. A navy dress, soft shoes, and my mother's locket around my neck. No makeup. No lipstick. Just presents. I wasn't invited, but I came anyway. They couldn't keep me out. Not today. The venue was a garden estate on the edge of town, marble stairs, floral arches, champagne fountains. Candace's fingerprints were all over it. As I walked in, people stared, whispered. Lily spotted me as she was walking down the aisle. She faltered just slightly. Then she smiled for the cameras. The ceremony moved like a blur, vows, rings, applause. Then came the reception. I waited. I waited until the champagne had been poured, until the first dance had ended, until Jason stood to thank the guests for coming. That's when I stepped forward. May I say a few words? I said calmly, holding the microphone he hadn't yet let go of. There was a pause. Then, out of sheer social pressure, he nodded and handed it to me. I stood there in front of 200 people. Family, friends, strangers. I'm Marjorie Carter, I said, voice steady. Mother of the bride. Polite applause. I'd like to share a gift. Not a toast, but a truth. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. My voice didn't shake. Some of you know me. Most of you don't. But what you may not know is that, 3 days ago, my daughter and her fiancé attempted to initiate the legal transfer of my home, while I am very much alive. Gasps. Murmurs. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. I set the letter on the nearest table. Then the deed to my home. And here's the truth. I have already updated my will. Lily will inherit nothing. If she contests, the entire estate goes to charity. Lily stood frozen, pale. Jason tried to speak, but I turned to him. I trusted you with her heart. You tried to take her soul. Silence. I handed the microphone back, turned and walked out. The slap would come later, when she followed me outside, humiliated, panicking. But that moment, this moment, was the real confrontation. Because that day I didn't come to ruin her wedding. I came to reclaim my name. She came after me in a blur of white satin and rage. I just reached the edge of the venue garden, past the hydrangea archways and glimmering fairy lights, when I heard my name. Mom! I stopped but didn't turn. Mom! Then I felt her hand, rougher than I remembered, tugging at my wrist. I turned slowly. Her eyes were wild, rimmed red, her veil slightly askew. What the hell was that? She spat. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I met her stare, unblinking. No, Lily. You did that. I just gave them the reason to notice. Her mouth opened but no words came out. The tears were coming fast now, not the soft, remorseful kind. The angry, self-pitying kind. The kind that wants to flip the script and make you the villain. "You've been bitter for years," she said through clenched teeth. "You can't stand that I have a better life now." I felt my breath catch, but not from pain. From clarity. "You think this is a better life?" I asked quietly. "Lying, scheming, turning against the woman who raised you?" She looked away. That was all the answer I needed. Behind her, guests were trickling toward the entrance again, murmuring to each other. Jason was nowhere in sight. "You could have talked to me," I said. "You could have asked for help. You know I would have given it." "You never helped me," she snapped. "You just smothered me. Controlled everything. You made me feel guilty for wanting more." "More," I repeated. "Is that what this is about?" My love came with casseroles and secondhand furniture and bedtime stories. Not diamonds and beachfront venues. But it was real. "I gave you everything I had. You gave me scraps," she hissed. And expected applause. And there it was. The slap hadn't landed yet, but that sentence hit like one. I felt heat rise in my face. Not from shame, but from a kind of ancient buried fury that only a mother can know. I stepped closer. "You think you built this life yourself? Without my sleepless nights, my skipped meals, my broken back from double shifts? Without the roof I kept over your head? The lunches I packed when there was barely food for me?" She folded her arms, defensive. "You're twisting it." "No, Lily. You've spent years twisting it, pretending the ugly parts didn't matter. Rewriting our story so you could feel polished in rooms like this." She looked like she might break. But not from grief, from pride. And then she slapped me. A quick, sharp sting across my cheek. Gasps rang out behind us. Someone had followed. Maybe more than one. I didn't flinch. I stood there, chin high, eyes locked on hers. "Feel better?" I asked. Her lips trembled. But I didn't wait for her answer. I turned and walked back toward the garden. Past the white chairs, past the floral centerpieces I helped pay for when I thought I still mattered. I didn't stop until I reached the gates. Thomas met me there. "She's just overwhelmed," he said weakly, like he'd rehearsed it. I looked at him and smiled for the first time in years. "No, Thomas. She's just you." He stepped aside. Outside the venue, the air felt different. Lighter. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt tall again. Whole. I knew the fallout would come. The calls, the gossip, the guilt trips. But none of that mattered now. Because I had spoken the truth. I had drawn the line. And most importantly, I had witnesses. Within 24 hours, the story had spread. Some said I was cruel. Others said I was brave. But everyone had an opinion. And Lily's perfect narrative had shattered like crystal under pressure. Jason didn't call me. But I heard through Marlene, bless her, that he had spent most of the night drinking, and that there was a fight between him and Lily behind closed doors. The kind guests pretend not to hear. By Monday morning, her office, where she worked in a PR firm downtown, had become a nest of murmurs. One of the guests was her supervisor's wife. Candace tried to spin it, of course. Claimed I had dementia. That I was confused, hurt, lashing out in grief. But the documents said otherwise. And those guests, they'd seen the receipts. People began to back away from her. Not dramatically, just with distance. Invitations dwindled. Smiles thinned. Deals paused. And Lily? She didn't call. Not to apologize. Not to explain. But I didn't expect her to. I had said what needed saying. I had drawn my line in ink and in blood. And I had done it with dignity. That was the part she didn't understand. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to slap back. I just needed the truth. Spoken out loud. Not hidden in corners anymore. And I needed to let go. Because sometimes the real revenge isn't destruction. It's peace. Do you think the mother made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The first morning after the wedding, I woke to silence. No phone calls. No messages. No apology. Not even a furious rant to defend herself. Just silence. It didn't feel peaceful at first. Felt like being forgotten. The apartment was still, the kind of stillness that used to soothe me after long workdays, but now it pressed in around me. I sat at the kitchen table, tea cooling beside me, and stared at the chair across from mine. The chair where Lily used to sit, swinging her legs, asking for more honey. Now it was just an empty seat. I walked through the apartment slowly, running my fingers along the furniture, the walls, the windowsills. So many memories embedded in the very paint. A faint chip in the hallway where Lily had scraped the wall with her backpack. A floorboard in the living room that creaked when you stepped on it. She used to giggle every time it squeaked. And the bedroom door still had a dent where she once slammed it after a fight about curfew. This place held more than my belongings. It held us. But now it was just me. I went outside for a walk. I didn't take my phone. I didn't want to see her name on the screen. Didn't want the hope or the disappointment. The streets were quiet that Sunday morning. Families bustled out of churches, little kids skipped beside strollers, and couples sipped coffee at sidewalk cafes. I walked slowly, unsure of where I was going. Eventually, I ended up at the park near the old elementary school. The one with the rusted swings and faded hopscotch paint. Lily used to call it the fairy park. Because the trees were so tall and twisty, she said fairies must live in them. I sat on a bench under one of those trees and looked up through the leaves. They moved gently in the breeze, sunlight flickering through like whispers. I let myself cry. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just slow tears sliding down my cheeks one after the other. I wasn't crying for what she'd done. I was crying for everything I had lost on the way to this moment. The little girl who used to sing to me. The teenager I used to wait up for, worrying myself sick. The young woman I believed might return to me, even after all the distance. She was gone. Not dead. Just unreachable. And in that park I finally accepted it. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt empty but clear. Later that afternoon, Marlene knocked on my door with a small pot of soup and a worried expression. "You doing okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I think so." She sat with me, no small talk. Just her hand over mine as I sipped slowly. "I heard from someone who was there," she said after a while. "Said you held your head high. Said you looked strong." I smiled weakly. It didn't feel strong. It just felt necessary. "That's the difference between strength and pride," she said. "Strength doesn't always feel good. It just keeps you standing." She was right. Over the next few days the quiet continued. My phone barely buzzed. The world went on. Grocery runs, laundry, old reruns on TV. But something had shifted in me. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Lily. Only a few lines. "I don't know how to undo what happened. Maybe I don't even want to. But I never hated you, Mom. I just needed something else. I'm sorry you had to find out like that. No apology. No responsibility. Just distance." I folded it and placed it in the drawer with the old quilt I never finished. And I moved on. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I painted the hallway a soft blue. I cleared out the closet full of old toys and school projects. I started walking every morning. Real walks, the kind where your heart moves faster than your feet. One day at the park, a young woman sat beside me on the bench. She was maybe 19 or 20, tear-streaked and holding a tattered duffel bag. We sat in silence for a while before she looked at me and asked, "Do you know where the women's shelter is?" I nodded. "I volunteer there," I said. "I can take you." And I did. That night I called Denise. "I want to do more," I told her. "With the shelter. With the women. I don't just want my name on a check. I want to help." Within a week I was sorting donations, painting walls, cooking dinners, listening to stories. And for the first time in a long time my presence felt wanted. Not tolerated. Not managed. Not exploited. Wanted. One evening one of the younger girls, a mother of two escaping a violent home, hugged me out of nowhere and whispered, "You remind me of my mom. She died when I was 15. And I felt something in me shift. Maybe I hadn't lost my role as a mother. Maybe I had just outgrown one chapter of it. Because being a mother isn't about biology. It's about showing up. And for people who needed me, I was still here. It started with a conversation over chipped mugs of coffee and a broken heater. The women's shelter had been short-staffed that month, and the boiler had gone out again. We were bundled in mismatched coats, laughing at how we could see our breath indoors. One of the young mothers, Camille, barely 20, with a toddler on her hip and another on the way, shivered and said, "Wouldn't it be something if we had a real house? Not just rooms with locks, but a place that felt like home." The idea lodged itself in my heart like a seed. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my old recliner, blanket wrapped around my shoulders, thinking about everything this house had seen. All the laughter, the tears, the dreams that never came true. And I realized something. I had been holding on to it like it was all I had left. But what if it could become something more? The next morning I called Denise. "I want to turn the apartment into a transitional home," I said. "For women coming out of the shelter. Somewhere safe. Somewhere that feels lived in. Not just survived in." She didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." The planning began right away. I met with the shelters board. We walked through my apartment together, room by room, brainstorming how to make the space work for more than just me. Bunk beds in the spare room, cribs in the corner. My sewing nook could become a quiet space for reading or journaling. We made lists. Furniture, repairs, renovations. A team of volunteers came in, old friends, local church members, even a few women I'd helped over the past few months. We painted the walls with colors that felt hopeful, warm, bright. One of the girls, a high school dropout named Justine, drew a mural in the hallway. A tree wide and wild with leaves that looked like tiny hearts. She said it reminded her of the one in the park near the shelter. We called it Marjorie's house. At first I was embarrassed. I hadn't done this for recognition. But they insisted. "You opened the doors," Camille said. "You should be on them." Word spread quickly. Donations began trickling in: blankets, books, diapers, even gently used strollers. A retired teacher offered to tutor the older kids. A neighbor volunteered to cook twice a week. The house started filling up with life again. Not noise but life. Giggles, the soft cries of newborns, the clinking of dishes at dinner time. I taught the girls how to make simple meals. Soups, roasts, casseroles that could stretch for days. We made chore charts. We shared stories. They started calling me Miss Marjorie. Then quietly, Mama M. I didn't correct them. One afternoon, as I was helping Justine practice for her GED exam, I glanced at the bookshelf in the corner. On it was Lily's old copy of Charlotte's Web, spine cracked, pages soft from overreading. One of the women must have unpacked it from a donation box. I stared at it for a long time. So many nights I read that book aloud to Lily, voices and all. Her favorite line had always been, "You have been my friend." That in itself is a tremendous thing. And now here I was, being a friend, a mother, a guide, to girls who hadn't tried to steal from me, who didn't see me as a burden, who cried on my shoulder without shame, without calculation. This wasn't just healing. It was purpose. A few weeks into the program, I found a letter in the mailbox. Not from Lily this time. It was from one of the wedding guests. An older woman I barely knew, someone from Jason's side. She'd been at the reception that day. Seen the documents. Heard every word. Her handwriting was delicate, thoughtful. "Dear Marjorie, I just wanted you to know that I've thought about you often since the wedding. You reminded me of my own mother. Dignified, quiet, strong when it counted. I'm sorry for what you endured, but I admire how you handled it. If ever you need support for your shelter project, please reach out." Enclosed is a small donation. I hope it helps. Inside was a check for $2,000. I wept holding it. Not because of the money, but because someone had seen me. Not just the humiliation, but the strength. Later that day, I shared the news at dinner. The girls clapped and cheered. We toasted with ginger ale in mismatched glasses. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a background character in someone else's life. I was the author again. I was building something lasting, not out of bitterness, but out of the ashes of everything that had burned. They started calling it home, without even realizing it. "I'll be home by 6, Camille would say, texting after a job interview. "I left my sweater at home," Justine muttered one morning while searching the common room. Caught me off guard at first. I'd spent so long thinking of these walls as mine. My refuge, my legacy, my failure even. But now, hearing them call it home, I realized something deep in my chest had shifted. This wasn't just my house anymore. It was ours. They didn't owe me anything. They weren't family by blood. But every time I came into the kitchen and found a sink full of dishes and someone trying to make pancakes from scratch, I smiled. Because this was real. The kind of chaos that meant you belonged. The kind I used to pray Lily would bring into my life again. Once she settled down and remembered who I was. But now I no longer waited for that knock. I no longer needed her voice in the hallway to feel like a mother. One afternoon we held a little celebration in the backyard. Just a few folding chairs, some store-bought cake, and laughter echoing between the buildings. It was Justine's 21st birthday. Her first sober one, she said. I never thought I'd live this long, she whispered to me when I handed her a cupcake. I hugged her. Tight. She held on longer than I expected. That evening, after everyone had gone inside, I stayed out under the string lights we'd strung across the fence, warm glow flickering above. I sat with a blanket across my lap and listened to the sounds of life through the open windows. Pots clanging, soft lullabies, snippets of conversation. It reminded me of those years when Lily was little, but it didn't ache anymore. It comforted. Around sunset, someone knocked on the gate. I turned, expecting a neighbor or maybe one of the girl's friends. But it was her. Lily. She stood there, holding a small bouquet of daisies, cheap, gas station flowers by the look of them. Her face was thin, eyes tired. She looked older but not wiser. More like someone carrying too many regrets. Can I come in? She asked softly. I nodded. Not warmly. Not coldly. Just honestly. She followed me into the backyard, glancing around at the garden beds and the laundry lines and the wooden bench Justine and I had painted purple. This is beautiful, she said. It's real, I replied. She didn't sit. She just stood there gripping the bouquet too tightly. I've been hearing things. About this place. About what you've done. I raised an eyebrow. From whom? She hesitated. People. Online. Marlene actually. And Candace. That made me laugh. She winced. Look, she continued, voice breaking a little. I know I've got no right to show up here. And I'm not asking for anything. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I said nothing. Not because I was cruel. But because I didn't want to fill the silence for her this time. She kept going. I didn't realize what I was doing until after the wedding. After you left. Everything fell apart. Jason and we're not together anymore. I nodded. I figured. Dad stopped answering my calls, she added quietly. Candace blocked me. Turns out once the money dries up, so does the affection. I didn't say I tried to warn you. She already knew. She swallowed hard. But you built something out of it. This house, these people. I don't know how you did it. I did what I've always done, I said. I took care of people who needed me. And this time, I stopped waiting for them to share my blood first. She finally sat beside me on the bench slowly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. After a moment, she placed the bouquet on the table and said, I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't if I were you. I looked at her. Really looked. She was broken. Not shattered but chipped. The kind of broken that makes you see the world differently if you let it. I don't hate you, Lily, I said at last. But I can't forget. And I won't pretend it didn't happen. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. I understand. We sat in silence again, the kind that isn't awkward, just heavy. Then from inside the house a child cried out. One of Camille's. Lily turned toward the sound. That a baby? She asked softly. One of many, I said. There are 5 here now. 2 moms are finishing GEDs. One just got a job. Another's learning to cook. She looked down at her hands. You really are a mom to everyone. I thought for a moment. No, not everyone. Just the ones who want one. She didn't respond. But I saw her shoulders fall, and with them a little of her pride. Before she left, she turned to me and asked, Is there anything I can do? I mean, not for forgiveness. Just to help. I paused. Drop off diapers sometime, I said. And maybe keep going to therapy. She blinked, startled. Then she nodded. Okay. As she walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt resolved. I didn't need her to come back. I didn't need a full circle reconciliation. I had my people now. Real family. It had been months since Lily showed up in the garden with those wilted daisies. She hadn't come back since. She sent a box once. No note, just baby formula, diapers, a few gently used coats. I assumed it was her way of contributing without asking to be seen. I accepted it. Quietly. Just like I accepted that we would never return to what we once were. Some bonds, when broken, don't heal the same. But then one morning in late spring I heard a knock on the door. Not the gate, the door. The front one. It was early. The house was quiet. Most of the girls were still asleep or out at appointments. I had just poured my tea when the knock came again, firmer this time. I opened it. And there she was. But not Lily. A girl. Maybe 16. Big brown eyes, freckles across her nose. She looked nervous, wringing her hands, shifting from foot to foot. "Are you Marjorie?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm Ellie," she said. "Lily's stepdaughter." My breath caught. "She told me I could find you here." I stepped aside. "Come in, sweetheart." She sat at the table, eyeing the pictures on the fridge, the quilt squares pinned to the wall, the smell of something baking in the oven. "She said you used to be a teacher," she said. "I wasn't. But I've taught a lot," I smiled. "She said you made her grilled cheese in the shape of hearts when she was sad." I did. And I hadn't heard anyone say that in decades. "She's not doing so great," Ellie added quietly. "She's trying, but, I think she misses you." She doesn't say it out loud. But I can tell. I looked at her. This child who'd found her way here on her own, asking for nothing, just trying to rebuild something her stepmother had broken. "She's lucky to have you," I said. Ellie smiled. "She says you were the first person who ever made her feel safe. That even when you were strict, it never felt scary." My eyes stung. I looked down at my hands folded tightly in my lap. "She wanted to come," Ellie added. "But I think she's still too ashamed. She keeps talking about the wedding like it was some nightmare she can't wake up from." I nodded slowly. "She hurt you," Ellie said. "Bad." "Yes," I said. "She did." Ellie didn't try to argue. She didn't try to fix it. She just sat with it. After a while, I stood and poured her a cup of tea. We talked for nearly an hour. About school, about Lily, about how Ellie had been there when Jason walked out 3 months after the wedding, blaming emotional stress and miscommunication. Ellie had stayed behind. She said Lily let her, even though they weren't related by blood. "She's not a great mom," Ellie admitted. "But she's trying. And she always said if I ever got really stuck, I could come here." That stunned me. Lily had said that? "Why did you come today?" I finally asked. Ellie shrugged. "I wanted to see who she used to be." I smiled. "Well, I'm still here." And I meant it. We walked through the house together. I showed her the mural, the pantry, the playroom we were slowly building from leftover donations and old toys. She touched everything with a kind of reverence, like she was seeing the root of a story she'd only heard half of. When she left, I gave her a bag of cookies to take home. "Tell her I said thank you," I said. "For the diapers. For sending you." Ellie nodded. "Will you come see her?" I paused, then gently shook my head. "Not yet." She didn't press. She just hugged me tight. That evening, I sat on the porch with my tea, watching the girls come and go from the shelter. Camille waved as she carried her baby out for a walk. Justine shouted from across the street, telling me she'd passed her GD mock test. Someone had left fresh flowers on the doorstep, wild ones from a local field. And I thought about Lily. Not with bitterness, but with something softer. She hadn't changed the past. She never could. But through Ellie, she had done something I hadn't expected. She had sent a bridge. Not to walk across right away, but to consider. And maybe someday I'd take that step. For now I was content. Content with my girls, my house, my purpose. Lily was no longer the center of my world. But she was no longer my wound either. Was the mother too harsh or finally fair? Let us know your thoughts below. The ribbon was red. A deep, bold red, stronger than pink, warmer than crimson. I tied it around the front gate myself that morning, my hands trembling slightly with age and anticipation. The girls had spent the whole week getting the house ready. Camille scrubbed the baseboards until they gleamed. Justine printed out flyers with photos of our little family and taped them to every grocery store window within a mile radius. Even the children helped, placing hand-painted rocks in the flower beds and giggling every time the wind knocked them over. It was the official opening of Marjorie's house. A real name. A real program. We'd partnered with the shelter, local churches, and even a small grant from the city. The home that once held my heartbreak was now holding others through theirs, and giving them something I never had in my worst moments. A soft place to land. By noon, people started trickling in. Neighbors, donors, friends. Women I hadn't seen in years. Even one of Lily's old teachers who hugged me with tears in her eyes and said, "I always knew you had something bigger inside you." Music played softly from a speaker in the window. We had lemonade, cookies, and a stack of applications for the next phase, turning the building next door into a child care center. That had been Justine's idea, and I'd never seen her smile wider than when we told her we were going to make it happen. As the crowd gathered around the gate, Denise stood beside me with scissors in hand. She looked at me and said, "You ready?" I was. We cut the ribbon together, and the crowd applauded. I didn't give a speech. I didn't need to. The house spoke for itself now. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and fresh paint. There were photo frames lining the hallway. Smiling faces, babies wrapped in soft blankets, young women holding certificates and job offers, arms linked together. In the kitchen, a small plaque had been hung by the pantry. "Love is not what we say. It's what we build." They had surprised me with that. It brought tears to my eyes the first time I saw it. Throughout the afternoon, guests asked me questions about the house, the program, the women. I answered them all with pride. I wasn't ashamed anymore. Not of how I got here. Not of who I'd become. And then just before sunset, someone I hadn't expected showed up. Lily. She didn't come to the gate. She stood across the street, holding a coffee cup in both hands, watching quietly. I saw her before she saw me, and for a moment I considered walking over. But I didn't. Instead, I turned to the children playing in the front yard. One of them had tripped and scraped his knee. I knelt beside him, cleaned the cut gently, kissed his forehead and sent him back to play. When I looked up again, Lily was gone. But I wasn't sad. I knew what she had seen. She had seen me. Not broken. Not bitter. But blooming. She had seen the woman who refused to disappear, even after being erased. The woman who took her pain and built something from it. That night, as the last guests left and the lights dimmed, I sat alone on the porch. The string lights above buzzed gently. The mural on the hallway wall glowed faintly under the porch lamp. The painted tree stretching toward the ceiling like it had grown roots in this home. I thought about the years. All the versions of myself. The young girl who dreamed of a family. The tired mother who worked herself raw. The heartbroken woman who was slapped in front of a crowd. And the survivor who finally stood up and said, "Enough." They were all me. But this was the woman I had waited my whole life to become. Not perfect. Not powerful. But peaceful. As I rose to go inside, I paused one last time at the front gate. I reached up and untied the red ribbon, folded it gently, and placed it in my pocket. A reminder of how it all began, and how I chose to end it on my own terms. Marjorie's house wasn't just a building. It was a story. Mine. And now it belonged to many others too. And as long as its doors stayed open, so would my heart.